The sky had just turned the color of cold steel when I zipped my suitcase shut. Everything was folded neatly. My cardigan, the gift for the twins, a jar of apple preserves. Nathan always said, reminded him of childhood. I sat by the window with my coat on hands in my lap, waiting to see his truck pull into the driveway like it had every Christmas Eve since the twins were born. Instead, a silver sedan stopped at the curb. The man who stepped out wasn't my son. He wore a black cap and didn't bother to open the door for me. "Mrs. Ward?" he asked. "Mr. Ward arranged for me to take you to Evergreen Place." "Evergreen," I repeated. "Is that a new restaurant?" He didn't answer, just took my bag and loaded it into the trunk. The drive was quiet, too quiet, until I saw the sign as we pulled in. Evergreen Assisted Living Center. My mouth went dry. Inside, the woman at the front desk smiled like I was a delivery. "Welcome, Ms. Ward. We've prepared a private suite for you." I pulled out my phone. No missed calls. No messages. I dialed Nathan. No answer. I tried again. Then came the text. "It's for your safety, Mom," Serena insisted. "We'll visit tomorrow. Merry Christmas." I stared at the words until they blurred. "Tomorrow," I whispered. "They're not coming tonight." I looked around the room. It smelled of peppermint and cleaning fluid. There was a fake wreath on the door and a plastic candle flickering on the nightstand. My bag sat by the wall, still zipped. I walked to the window just in time to see the car disappear around the corner. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just pressed my hand to the cold glass and let the quiet swallow the rest of the day. By the time I turned around, the silence had settled like dust in my chest. My fingers brushed the sweater in my bag, the one I'd made for the twins. I unpacked slowly, my hands moving without thought. The room was too clean, too still. I placed the twins' sweater on the chair by the window. Pale blue for Jonah, soft green for Lily. I'd even sewn little initials near the collar, though I knew Serena would likely scoff at the uneven stitching. Outside the door, I could hear a scratchy speaker playing carols, half a beat off tune. Silent Night faded into White Christmas, but none of the voices matched the ones I'd spent years memorizing. No excited giggles, no thundering little footsteps, no Nathan calling out for extra forks. Dinner was served on a brown tray with a packet of salt and a cup of lukewarm tea. The meatloaf smelled like wet cardboard. I sat across from a man named Hank, who winked as he poked at his peas. "My daughter said it's just for the holidays, like a vacation." He chuckled. "Guess I'm a hotel guest now." I smiled thin and practiced. My hands stayed curled beneath the table so he wouldn't see the tremble. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, the tray barely touched. 9 o'clock came. Then 9:15. I picked up the phone, dialed. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. At 9:27, the screen lit up. A photo. Nathan, Serena, the twins, in matching pajamas in front of a glittering tree, hot cocoa in mugs, a golden retriever in the corner. Serena had added a caption, "Finally, peace and quiet." The blood drained from my face. My thumb hovered over the screen. I almost wrote back. What about me, but the words didn't leave my chest. I locked the phone and set it face down on the nightstand. Outside, a nurse laughed softly as she walked past. Someone in the next room started coughing. The fake candle flickered on. I turned away from the window and sat in the dark. I didn't cry. I just let the silence stretch around me, thick as wool, until something in the corner of my coat pocket crinkled under my hand. I woke before the sun rose, still curled in my cardigan from the night before. My bones ached, not from the mattress, but from something deeper. Something I hadn't named yet. I sat up slowly, brushing my hand against my coat draped over the chair. There was something inside the pocket, a stiff crinkle. I reached in and pulled it out. A lottery ticket. I stared at it. The corners soft. the ink slightly faded from rubbing against my keys. I remembered buying it 3 days ago at the corner store near my old house. The young cashier had laughed not unkindly. "Maybe it'll change your year, ma'am," he'd said. I'd bought milk bread and that one ticket. I smoothed it carefully across my lap, the numbers lined in a row like a forgotten wish. For the first time since yesterday, my mouth lifted slightly. When breakfast came, I carried my tray to the lounge instead of eating in my room. The others were gathered around the television. Hank waved me over. "Come on, they're about to call the numbers," he said. I didn't really plan to check. I held the ticket lightly in my fingers, more out of habit than hope. The anchor smiled too brightly. "Here are last night's winning numbers." I read them once, then again, then once more, as if they might change. I looked down. Hank leaned closer. "Ma'am, you just won." I couldn't speak. My chest went still. Then it began again, slow, sure, certain. I gripped the ticket with both hands, afraid it might disappear. Around me, no one noticed. The world moved as if nothing had shifted, but I knew it had. As the room filled with chatter and clinking trays, I folded the ticket and slipped it into my pocket again. Tomorrow could wait. This needed to be real. By mid-morning, everyone at Evergreen seemed to know. Whispers trailed me down the hallway. Staff peeked around corners, smiling in that stunned, overly careful way people do when they realize someone ordinary has suddenly become extraordinary. A nurse pressed a paper cup of water into my hands, as if I might faint. Another held out her phone, asking timidly if she could take a photo for verification. The director who yesterday had called me dear now appeared at my door, straightening his tie. "Ms. Ward," he said smoothly. "The state representative from the lottery just phoned. They'd like to arrange a visit. Of course we'll ensure your comfort." I nodded, steady. "I'll manage," I said. Back in my room, I closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and pulled out my phone. My finger hovered over Nathan's name. The old reflex tugged at me, share the good news bridge, the distance make him proud. But the moment passed. He had made his choice. I put the phone down. I didn't owe him my joy, my surprise, or my forgiveness. Not this time. Instead, I scrolled to the number on the back of the ticket and called the lottery office. My voice didn't shake. "This is Eveline Ward. I believe I have the winning ticket. I'd like to confirm and schedule a meeting." After that, I called a law firm listed on the station's website. "I'll need representation," I told the receptionist. "And I'd prefer we meet somewhere outside Evergreen Place." When the call ended, I sat still for a moment, feeling the air settle. My composure surprised me, not from pride, but from clarity. Outside, someone laughed down the hall. I folded the ticket into my purse, zipped it closed, and began to plan how to step outside those doors again. The lights were hotter than I expected, the kind that make your skin glow a little too much, and your scalp prickle under soft curls. The makeup artist had dabbed something on my cheeks, murmuring about camera tones. I let her. I wasn't here to argue. The producer counted down behind the camera. 3, 2. Then the red light blinked on. Mrs. Ward, the reporter, said, her voice as smooth as satin. "How does it feel to win $4 million on Christmas Day?" I didn't look at her. I looked past her into the camera. "Unexpected," I said, "but fitting." There was a beat of silence. Then applause. I held the oversized check with both hands, its numbers gleaming under the lights. I could feel the weight of every eye on me, from the crew to the audience. But my voice didn't shake. Yesterday, I said I was left at a care home. No explanation. No seat at the table. Just silence. I paused, not for drama, but for truth. Today, I stand here holding my own future. There was another pause, heavier this time. Then a second wave of applause, louder, longer. The reporter leaned in slightly, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second. I knew that look. She'd expected tears, maybe gratitude. Not steel. The segment wrapped. They shook my hand, took more photos, offered coffee I didn't want. I thanked them politely, folded my hands in my lap, and waited for the car they promised would take me back to the hotel. An hour later, the clip aired. My face, clear and calm, filled every screen. The words played back exactly as I said them, no edits. Across town, I imagined the brunch table going quiet, forks set down. A phone screen tilted just slightly for Serena to see. And in that silence, I knew they finally saw me. Not as a burden, not as an obligation, but as something they never thought I'd be again. Unreachable. By noon, the phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Missed calls, voicemails, message after message. Mom, please call us. We just want to talk. Serena's crying. We didn't mean I turned the phone face down on the table without replying. Across from me, the lawyer adjusted his glasses and slid a folder toward me. You're the sole owner of your home, he said. The title is clean. I've already started paperwork to secure it, just in case anyone tries to act before you're ready. I nodded. Have the locks changed, I said quietly. He made a note. We'll coordinate everything. After the meeting, I walked through the city a while. No one stopped me. No one knew who I was, and I liked it that way. Later that night, I sat in my hotel room, lights low. The television played softly in the background, and there I was, again smiling faintly, holding the check. I looked composed, maybe even elegant. I studied myself. Not the makeup or the hair, but the eyes. They didn't look surprised. They looked certain. For a moment, my reflection overlapped with the younger me in the screen, not the woman in the cardigan at Evergreen, not the mother waiting at the window, the girl who once believed in the rhythm of holidays and promises kept. I reached for the remote and turned the screen off. The room fell into silence, no music, no voices, no footsteps overhead. Just me. And for once, that was enough. I walked to the window, drew the curtain back slightly, and watched the city shift under the weight of evening. The phone buzzed again behind me, but I didn't turn around. Instead, I reached for the envelope the lawyer had left in my bag, thick, official, solid, in my hand. 2 days later, I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The key still turned smooth and sure, like it had every year before they moved in. My attorney followed quietly behind clipboard in hand, but I didn't need guidance through my own home. The air inside smelled like candles that had burned too long. The living room was just as I'd left it mostly. A few things were gone. The framed photo of my wedding, the watercolor Jonah made in first grade, the ceramic angel from the mantel. But the bones of the place remained. My books still lined the shelves' spines, worn in all the right places. The armchair still had the tiny tear in the seam that Nathan promised to fix 5 Christmases ago. By mid-afternoon, the locksmith arrived. He didn't ask questions, just nodded when I said all the locks, please. While he worked, I stood on the porch and watched the street. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the wind chimes I'd hung years ago. They hadn't been taken down. I took that as a small grace. When the final bolt clicked into place, the locksmith handed me the new keys. I closed my hand around them and felt the quiet press of something final. My attorney shook my hand, said he'd file the rest tomorrow. I nodded and waited until his car disappeared down the street. Then I stepped back inside, alone. No one needed to know what I planned next. The house no longer echoed with their voices. It breathed with mine now, slow, steady, and unshaken. In the evening light, I unpacked the last of my things and left the porch light on. The knock came just as the sun began to slip behind the trees, firm, deliberate, and too familiar to be a stranger's. I stood for a moment, hand hovering over the knob before opening it. Nathan stood on the porch, Serena beside him. Both looked smaller than I remembered. His tie was crooked, her eyes red from rehearsed tears. "Mom," he began, voice low, careful. "We made a mistake." I leaned against the doorframe. Only one, he swallowed. We just thought that I was disposable. I finished for him. The words came out soft, almost kind. They landed harder that way. Serena stepped forward, clutching her coat. It wasn't like that. We were overwhelmed, the house, the kids, the business. We thought you'd be more comfortable there temporarily. Temporarily, I repeated the word thin on my tongue. And Christmas dinner. The photo by the tree. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Nathan looked at the floor. I've seen the interviews, he said finally. You didn't have to say what you did. I didn't say anything untrue. He took a step closer. We just want to make things right. I let the silence stretch until he finally looked up at me. His face, the same one that used to press against my shoulder when storms scared him, looked older now, but not wiser. You'll hear from my lawyer, I said evenly. Everything else is done. Serena's voice cracked. You can't mean that she's I said, everything else is done. I closed the door before she could finish. The sound was quiet, almost gentle. I leaned my forehead against the wood for a moment, breathing in the faint scent of pine polish. Through the glass panel, I saw their figures linger uncertain, then drift down the steps. Their car started. The engine faded into the night. I turned off the porch light and locked the door. Then I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and sat down at the table to plan what would come next. Weeks passed quietly, the kind of quiet that no longer felt heavy. Each morning I woke before dawn, brewed coffee, and opened the folder my lawyer had prepared a roadmap for the future I hadn't known I wanted. We met again downtown in a small conference room that smelled faintly of paper and rain. Across from me sat a financial advisor, her pen poised above the ledger. You could invest conservatively, she said, or do something meaningful. A foundation, perhaps. The word settled in the air. Foundation. Something that stood even when people didn't. I thought of the residents at Evergreen, the ones whose children had stopped calling long before mine did. I thought of Hank still waiting for a ride home that never came. I want to help them, I said. The ones like me. By the end of the week, the paperwork was done. A modest fund, privately managed, devoted to protecting seniors from exploitation. I named it Second Morning, because that's what life had given me, another beginning I never saw coming. The first grant went to an elderly couple evicted by their son after he forged their signatures on a refinance. The check wasn't large, but it was enough to get them into a small apartment near the coast. The woman cried over the phone. Her husband simply said, "You gave us air again." A few days later, a journalist requested an interview for a human interest column. I agreed on one condition, no dramatics, just facts. When she asked why I'd started the fund, I answered simply, because I remember what it feels like to be forgotten. The article appeared the following Sunday. It didn't make front-page news, but the piece circulated quietly, online, accompanied by the same clip of me holding the check under studio lights. I watched it once, just long enough to see my own eyes on the screen, steady, unflinching. Then I closed the laptop and looked out at the garden where new shoots had begun to push through the cold soil. Spring settled into the bones of the house like it had always belonged there. The rooms no longer echoed, they breathed. In the mornings, I pulled open the curtains to let the sun spill across the floor, and by afternoon, the scent of turned soil drifted in through the back door. A neighbor's daughter, Emma, started coming by after school. She liked to dig in the garden, asking questions about lavender and carrots while her hands got dirty. I let her plant whatever she liked. Something about the way she hummed while working made the yard feel younger. Once a week, volunteers from Second Morning came by. We used the dining room for meetings now. Paperwork ideas, small grants discussed over coffee, and lemon muffins I'd learned to make from a recipe in the back of a magazine. It wasn't a charity. It was a place with open doors, quiet, useful, steady. Some evenings, I would sit on the porch, a cup of tea in hand, the radio humming something soft from the living room. I left the porch lamp on at dusk. Not because I was waiting, not for anyone to come back, just because the light made the house feel honest. Inside the walls bore no photos of those who once filled them with noise and demand. Instead, there were hand-drawn thank you notes from seniors we'd helped, a photo of Emma holding a tomato the size of her fist, and a calendar marked with grant deadlines and birthdays of people I hadn't known a year ago. I didn't hear from Nathan and Serena again. The silence didn't hurt. It held no weight. One night, I sat near the window as the sky faded to blue, and I thought of that Christmas when everything broke open like a storm. But storms pass, and what they leave behind isn't always wreckage. Sometimes it's space, and from that space things grow.